So, welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 7 of the Odyssey podcast. And today we are joined by actually a much requested guest. We ran a members survey there a few weeks ago, and you were requested 4 times, Amelia.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Check me out.
Amelia Potter, Pottsthinks on Instagram. We're delighted to have you, Amelia. Why don't you give yourself a little bit of an introduction before we jump in?
Cool, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's nice to know that I'm wanted somewhere, so that's cool. Yeah, I'm a sport performance psychologist. I've kind of niched myself to strength sports, predominantly powerlifting now. And yeah, I'm just kind of here working with athletes, helping them excel, get past barriers, and, you know, trying to really open up the world of powerlifting to the idea of sports psychology.
Love it. Amazing. Awesome. So tell us a little bit, we'll jump right in. If you tell us a little bit about kind of your background and how you got into sports psychology or sports in general, what's your story?
So sports in general, I grew up with 3 brothers, and a very competitive father, and I ended up being, as in my father's words, the son he never had. So sorry to my 3 brothers, but I kind of ended up being the really sporty one. So I loved sport growing up, was in all the teams, went to uni and ended up captaining my uni's lacrosse team, which is my main sport. Super kind of like unpopular in Europe anyway. But yeah, so that's kind of my sporting background in a super quick nutshell, because, you know, no one cares about my actual athletic history, so that's not interesting. But sports psychology, I did an undergraduate in psychology under the bracket of psychology and counselling, and it's a super broad degree. I took a year out after that and was a sports coach, a lacrosse coach actually, predominantly at a school. And I kind of working with athletes one-to-one or teams, I just really loved. I'd always worked in a capacity of kind of sports and athleticism during kind of the summers of my uni, kind of beforehand when I was like 15, 16, I was a football coach. And yeah, I knew I wanted to do a master's, and I was stuck between, I finally whittled it down essentially between criminal law psychology and sports psychology, and it was kind of a no-brainer for me, mixing something I was so passionate about, being kind of sports and athleticism and fitness, with the degree that I was super passionate about, which is always super cringy to say because everyone's like, it's my passion, but you know, like it did end up being that. So I did my master's in sport and exercise psychology. Absolutely loved it. I'm a super big nerd, so it was my cup of tea completely. And yeah, and then I started having some experience working with some really good sports psychologists as lecturers, and then having really good connections with them. Working with athletes slowly kind of over time, as you know, I help you, you help me. I'm getting the experience, you're getting a free sports psych. And then, you know, slowly I just started building my business up, building up my research, my kind of clientele, my roster, my knowledge, connections, etc. You know, how anyone kind of builds up. And yeah, I guess here I am. I'm a member of BASES, which is I'm going to get this wrong and I'm going to get slated by other sports psychologists. It's the British Association of Sport Exercise Sciences. So, and then my degree is BPS. So yeah, that's a really quick roundup, not quick at all, of me, I guess.
Amazing. Why powerlifting? I mean, you said you played lacrosse, which is really cool, actually. I've always wanted to see lacrosse happen in the flesh. I've never actually seen a lacrosse game. But do you have a thing for niche sports, or why did you...
I mean, it does seem that way. It seems like I am super kind of drawn to the less popular sports in Europe, at least. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of started going to the gym myself when I was pretty late, to be fair, like halfway through uni, and I did it as a kind of a supplement to, you know, the other niche sport being lacrosse. And I eventually just kind of, I had a coach and I started working towards potentially, and this was a nutrition and bodybuilding coach, and I started working towards potentially competing on stage in bodybuilding. And then it just didn't feel right to me, and I ended up just having all these connections in powerlifting, as in like friends. I went to uni with do you know Diwaz? He works in Plexium. Maybe not. He's an English coach, and I went to uni with him, so I've known him a long time. And yeah, I kind of worked a bit with lacrosse athletes, and I just find it really interesting working with athletes kind of in an individual sport anyway. I have worked with kind of other sports like golf and things like that, which are individual athletes, but powerlifting was something I knew about, and I enjoyed learning about and, you know, playing about with in my own time as well. So I think to be able to practice techniques and interventions in my own time and then bring it forward to athletes and kind of say it's tried and tested, also just to enjoy all the conversations rather than me pursuing something like golf. And don't get me wrong, like I have nothing, like I like golf. I don't think there's a sport I don't like, but for me it's just not exhilarating. It's not something I could sit down and hear about kind of all day, whereas I love the conversations about powerlifting, and that makes it that much more interesting to me.
Awesome. I think it is. We said this. I think it was on the episode we had Andrew Rowe on, who's he's a coach under Odyssey Strength and also a pretty successful lifter. But it's just an inherently cool sport. Like the actual game day aspect of it. Like it's just you're doing something cool, you know.
Yeah, it is, and it's super kind of primal in a way.
Mm.
But as a sports psychologist or sport performance psychologist, that also makes it so interesting because it is one of those sports that essentially you are training so many hours for and so hard for what's going to be like a few minutes, you know, on the platform. And it's kind of 9 attempts you get, and the immense kind of mental focus, confidence, and pressure that goes into the kind of those few moments is so immense. And it's interesting, like for me anyway, but to help somebody kind of achieve that in a calm and more confident way is just super, I don't think satisfying is the right word, but just, you know, it makes me happy to see athletes perform in a way that they're happy with.
It's gratifying, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. It's yeah, it's crazy that like people say you get 9 minutes on the platform. You know, you could do a year of training for 9 minutes, but you don't get 9 minutes on the platform. Like no one's taken 9 minutes. You know, you get maybe 4.5 minutes on the platform over the course of like a 3-hour day. You know, it is one of these sports where like fight or flight is kind of like more prevalent, you know, like
Yeah.
in a rugby match, which was growing up my main sport. There's plenty of opportunities to, you know, if you kind of fall over a hurdle, well, you can get back on the horse and make sure the next play is right and kind of
Yeah.
build your confidence on that. Powerlifting, you don't have that opportunity, at least on game day.
No,
So
absolutely.
so having that confidence, it's something I want to ask you about. Like we harp on a lot about making movement unconscious, and we do that because unconscious in our experience correlates very closely to confident.
Yeah.
You know, if you're stepping onto the platform and all that's in your mind is absolutely smashing the weight that's in front of you, you know, in whatever way you want to do that, whether it's super hyped or super calm or whatever, but your entire focus is just executing, you know, the reps that you've done 1,000 times in training. Do you think that kind of approach is more favorable than maybe an approach where you're on the platform kind of cueing yourself through 15 different things? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think something that all athletes want to achieve is a good sense of flow when they're competing. And I think a big mistake that a lot of people do make is that you can just suddenly switch that on in the moment and just be like, well, and like, don't get me wrong, some people can, some people are, you know, absolutely amazing and naturally just being like, this is my moment. But just like you wouldn't go to a meet having not trained in the gym, and then go be like, oh, I'm gonna pull this, you know, 3-time body weight deadlift. It's just like, no, no, you're not. It's the same with kind of with, you know, mental techniques, and you have to kind of make it part of the flow, make it feel natural, and understand the kind of cognitive behaviors, thoughts, emotions behind the processes that you're doing, to really be able to kind of stamp them in and implement them in a game day experience. And that's something called affective training, which is essentially replicating, you know, the competition or the game day or competitive environment as much as you can in a training environment. And by kind of eliminating all the factors in the sense of kind of, you know, training hard, training mental techniques, sports psych techniques, you know, making sure your physical health is up to date, so kind of physios and such. You're eliminating all the factors that, you know, you could be like, oh well, my head wasn't in it, oh well, I had this niggle, you know. And by doing that, you know that it's just, I'm gonna pull this weight or I'm not. There's nothing else behind it. And it's a case of just not leaving that to last minute. You know, you wouldn't go to a meet with a busted knee and then find a physio 2 minutes before you jump on the platform and be like, you know, I think I've torn my ACL. You're like, don't come to me now with that. I can't help. So if someone comes to me in, you know, like a meet, obviously I can give them help and techniques that, you know, in 5 minutes time they can use. But will that be as effective as somebody who I've been working with for weeks or months, who kind of, you know, it's second nature to them now? We've been able to add layers. No, you know, I feel like I've gone on a huge, you know, different direction to whatever you asked me, but I'm really sorry. That was my answer to
almost like it's a skill to be developed and implemented into your training, with the other things that maybe are a little bit more obvious.
Yeah,
training
absolutely.
the physical side of things, that cultivating this mindset and this attitude to bring onto the platform is something that happens weeks and months outside of it, and not something that, oh, I'm going to pick this up on the day
absolutely
and do it. Cool. Is Adam frozen? Maybe.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was frozen as well.
The differences between working with athletes in a team sporting environment and then working with individuals. I'm completely ignorant of this, but I wonder, is there much of a difference between working with athletes that are in a team sport versus being on an individual side of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
You told me to keep rolling, by the way, so let's just work.
Okay. See you later, Adam. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just in the simple nature of having other people there to kind of, in both ways, lean back on, and, you know, you're also trying to succeed well for other people as well. You work with kind of the cohesive nature of a team and how they gel together, how they work by themselves, kind of the relationship between teammate to teammate, from teammate to coach, from coach to teammate. And there's almost a lot more for them to lean back on in a team sport, because, you know, if someone's having a bad day, either, you know, there's a sub there or there's somebody they can pass to. And there's a lot more to fall back on. And I feel like there's just so much more pressure on individual athletes who kind of, you know, they can't tap out, and they can't just, you know, they can't rely on having another teammate come in for them. They can't rely on someone else performing well for them and hoping, you know, everybody gets a win. It's kind of, I go into this moment, I have to perform well, and that's a lot of pressure for kind of one person. So yeah, I absolutely think there's a huge difference in working with teams and individuals, and I think that there's many points behind it, and I think that's just kind of like the key thing that, first of all, is the difference, but is also the difference that drove me to work with individuals, kind of that pressure.
Big time. Yeah, it's actually it's kind of the reason as well. I, similar to Adam, had a background in rugby and Gaelic football, and I kind of craved this responsibility that was inherent to an individual sport. Like it's your game. If you didn't get it, it's your fault, or that if you did get it, this is something special to you. But it's interesting that you say that. Adam is back with us here.
Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think Gaelic football, by the way, super cool sport. I think, yeah, it is super interesting, and like I said, that kind of pressure that inherently you do go towards is going to be a driving force to push you through, absolutely. But it's so important that it's handled in a way that that you can kind of grab hold of. Just like if you had a 17-year-old new athlete who's has so much strength, you kind of don't know what to do with it. As a coach, kind of it's your job to hone it in and make sure they don't hurt themselves, they're not kind of stupid with their training. And it's the same with, I don't want to say an untrained mind, because that seems really harsh, and it's not. Like, it's just,
I'll say it if you want.
An untrained mind. But if you're working, if you haven't, even if it's taking it upon yourself, if you haven't done the research and tried out interventions, like you're gonna be untrained in a way, and to kind of go into comps or training without that is almost pulling you back anyway, because you don't have that extra kind of control variable that you would have otherwise.
It's like they have this huge potential, and it's nearly our responsibility to focus it and push it in the direction, and with this focus they could go further with it.
Yeah,
does that sound
absolutely
fair to say? I was going to ask you as well, actually, on powerlifting, and that the pressure that somebody feels, it being an individual sport. Do you find that's what some people come to you with as an issue, that they struggle to deal with this pressure? Is that one of the main things that you find people struggle with?
I mean, I think it is, but it's not how they verbalize it. I think that in itself manifests in a lot of different ways, and whether that's kind of a lack of focus because they aren't in a situation where other people are like, put your head back in the game, get your head in the game, or if it's confidence because they know that they have that pressure on them. If it's comparison because they don't inherently have that other teammate where they're like, okay, well, X is running this fast, or X has got this many goals this season. So they end up, comparing themselves to other athletes, which is unfair, So I think it absolutely is one of the big problems, but it manifests itself in different ways. And I think a lot of people don't understand that there are a lot of pressures that will naturally come with being an individual athlete. And it can manifest in different ways if not dealt with correctly, I suppose.
I suppose recognizing that it can come from this one thing, or that you might be seeing the symptom of an issue rather than the cause of it. And I suppose it makes sense to try and find the cause of it and to address that rather than the symptom of an issue.
Yeah, and like loads of other things in like general psychology as well, sometimes it is kind of the factor of cause and effect. Like, is it the confidence being an effect of like them being an individual sport, or vice versa? Like, what's the cause and what's the effect of this particular problem? So some people do genuinely do to come to me and say like, oh, I'm not confident in this specific lift, and it is pinpointed to that, and they are very aware of that. Whereas someone else might come to me with a confidence problem that they might think is, oh, I just get really panicky before I lift, and it might be more down to the fact that there is that pressure. So yeah, absolutely.
Something I was going to ask before I cut out, and I hope this hasn't been asked already, is like what's the process when someone comes to you? You know, we'll take a powerlifter for example, because that's us and our audience and whatnot. But when someone comes to you and says they want to perform better, you know, or they want to improve their ability to perform on game day, what's the kind of process for you? How do you work that?
That has already been up. No, joking, it hasn't. It's so essentially athletes come to me, and they normally, you know, message me directly through kind of Instagram, and either that or they kind of just chuck in an application form, and they'll come to me, and before anything else, we'll talk about their athletic history and, you know, chat about what they think is the problem and, you know, what they want to focus on. And then, you know, through that, we kind of dive deeper into it, and either they're, you know, spot on and that's like, yeah, we're going to focus on that first, or they come in with like an idea of what they want to work on, and then, you know, further down the conversation they're like, oh, actually, you know, this might be the problem, and that ends up being kind of a byproduct of, you know, the main problem. And so it's very rare. I think I've only had it once or twice that an athlete's been referred to me a few days before a competition, and I'm always very hesitant to kind of I won't refuse to talk to them like a celebrity or something, but I mean, like, I'm very hesitant to talk business or shop or psychology with an athlete a few days or the day of a comp firsthand, because like I don't want to change their routine. Like that's something that is so incredibly important, is the routine, the flow. And if I just suddenly go, oh, well, this might work for you, and even if I say it in passing, they might take that as gospel and go, okay, well, in comp I'm going to do this because, you know, I don't want to either waste it. A lot of people think that if they use it too early, like it's like a magic power that they're gonna, you know, if I use this once in comp, it's gonna be the time it works. And or they, you know, they're just like, okay, well, I'm going to practice it so much in these 3 days leading up that it's going to make up for all the other time. And it's just like cramming for a test. Like you might get some of the results that you wanted, but it's not going to be anywhere near as effective or as drilled into you as if, you know, you were revising for weeks or months or whatever. And yeah, I think it's that that's why I'm really hesitant. So yeah, I very rarely get athletes close to comp coming to me, and when I have, you know, I've tried to help in a way that's not going to be too disruptive. But usually, yeah, an athlete will kind of come to me in off season, or, you know, X months before a meet, and either come to me with an issue, or, you know, vice versa, come to me with something they want to excel, because I think that's a huge misconception that sport psych, sport performance psych, sport mental coaches, etc., we're only here if somebody has a problem. And I think that's a stigma we're still trying to get over, that, you know, we're here to help athletes excel just like a coach is. Like, you wouldn't just get a coach if your training was, you know, going down the toilet. You'd get a coach because you want your training to go well. So
somebody
yeah.
had said that to me actually recently. It's funny that you say that, and it was in a conversation relevant to, I don't want to say standard psychology or psychotherapy, but they put it in terms of, you don't just go to the gym, or the gym isn't just for people who are extremely out of shape or on death's door. Just like therapy isn't for people who are at their wits' end only. It's for kind of run-of-the-mill people who are just normal people, or even people who would see themselves as in a really good spot. Like it's for everyone, and there's always progress to be made, and there's always things to figure out. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as humans, we're super complex, and super simple at the same time. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, we live very intricate lives, and everything is constantly changing. And as human beings, we hate change. Like, just naturally, we hate change. Whether like someone wants to admit it or not, it's an innate thing. And you know, change is happening all the time. We're in a pandemic. Like, we don't know what's happening. We have no idea what's happening. And so yeah, with something like therapy, it absolutely is there for just, you know, everyday, I say everyday people, you know, in quotes mark, not, you know, these are hard terms to kind of verbalize without sounding insensitive. But yeah, just like therapists themselves have to get regular therapy. Like, it's for everyone. It's just like having a coach, you know, having a PT, having a physio, having a sports psych. It's just looking after yourself at the end of the day, and it's just making sure you're doing what you want to do correctly and to the best of your abilities. And you know, there's nothing wrong or to be ashamed of, you know, with any of that.
Something I want to jump back to as well, and something that I really appreciate is your reluctance to I suppose disrupt, as you put it, the athlete. Like in those examples of athletes who came to you quite close to competition, you were very reluctant to disrupt their routine. I think that's something all sports professionals, so everyone under the umbrella of working with, you know, an athlete, should take heed of. Like, it doesn't matter how important you are, or oftentimes think you are, like messing with something as important as an athlete's routine headed into a competition or a sport like powerlifting, you know, where those couple of minutes are so important, is never a good thing. You know, you might have some fantastic advice, but wait and just, you know, hold it. So I really appreciate that. And if anyone listening is within this domain of being a sports professional, I hope that's something that you put into practice as well, because super important, super important, whether it's technique or whatever. So really appreciate that. So next question, kind of difficult one to word. It was difficult to type. I'll try and put it into words, but what is, like, I actually know a lot more now just having chatted to you for 20 minutes than I did when I was writing this question, but what is the kind of the scope of what you do? Obviously, you know, what you do, the aim is improving performance, right? Mainly, obviously, it's, you know, multifaceted, but what is the scope? Like, when do you have to kind of be like, okay, I need someone else here? What's the scope of sports psychology as opposed to, you know, other forms of psychology? You know,
this is actually, like, I'm super glad you have asked this question, because this is something that's actually been super frustrating for me and other people that I know that in my personal domain, like as in like in sports psych and sports science, as well as coaches. And I think it's super important to know kind of your professional boundaries. I made a post with Louisa the other day, who's a PhD, a sports psych student, and it's kind of knowing. So, like, obviously I'll speak about sports psych first, because, you know, that's why I'm here. And it's knowing where your, you know, knowledge and professional certifications and boundaries lie, along kind of with an ethical and moral standpoint. As well, and also the client, the athlete, they need to know your level of expertise as well. So, you know, if somebody comes to me with a mental health problem, if it's not kind of related to, you know, training or performance or something, for example, this is completely made up. If someone was like, I'm super depressed and, you know, I just don't know what to do with myself, I'll say, look, I'm not a mental health specialist and I'm absolutely here to listen if you need me to, but I think, you know, you could be better off talking to X, Y, and Z and signpost them outwards. And I think it's easy to forget sometimes that performance psychs are not therapists. And, you know, I've been really lucky in the fact that the athletes I've worked with kind of have known that boundary themselves. But by all means, if you do need the help, I can't, like, a professional should be able to signpost, and I think that's something really important. And I've seen it a lot on Instagram recently, where obviously no names will be named, but where there are coaches or other professionals who are posting things that just they should not be posting about, whether it's a coach posting about kind of the, I don't know, like hormones and DNA or physio stuff, or like why people should be depressed. And it's like, no, I mean, like there's I'm sorry if I've atted you there. I haven't meant to. I mean, like, there's definitely a respectful way to do it, but there's posts I've seen that have been like, I know this is my, like, and it's not said like, this is what I know of it and this is where I've got it from. It's kind of just a coach or a psych or a physio trying to be everything.
Of course. And
if they're kind of sat there being like, hey, I got this information from, so if I did I don't know why I would, but if I did a post about, powerlifting coaching, again, I'm not sure why I would, because to me that is so strange, and I got the information off of Adam, I'd be like, this is kind of my post, blah blah blah, like, this isn't my realm of expertise. I got all this information from Adam, and go talk to him if you want to talk about coaching, because I know that's not my job. And if I want to post information about it, absolutely. I think, by all means, if you want to share information, do. But either kind of say, like, this is my understanding or this is my knowledge, I'm not an expert, or refer out. Because I've seen so many coaches and other professionals. The only reason I'm atting coaches so much is because they're way more prevalent in the industry.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you. It's they're the people that need to be addressed here. Like, these are the culprits, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and it's only because it can be harmful. And it's only a few posts that I've seen, but the posts that I have seen, like, I know that other professionals have been taken aback by and been like, are you sure you should, like, I wouldn't even say that. Like, are you sure you should be saying that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, to answer your initial question, my kind of scope is helping people with performance. I help people kind of get past barriers, excel, whether that's confidence, nerves, injury rehab. I'm obviously not going to give physio like exercises, but with the kind of the psychological return from injury and going through that's a very difficult thing to kind of process for athletes. It's a huge thing that sport performance psychs help with. It's, that's what I mean by that. Like, anything kind of briefly in that realm, absolutely. But if an athlete comes to me with, oh, it says this in my program, and I'm not sure, I'm like, well, I can't help you with the exercise, so talk to your coach, or we'll organize a 3-way call, or like, oh, I've got a niggle on my shoulder and it's it's really throwing me off, and I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to do a lift or not to do a lift, because that's also not my place. Speak to your physio, speak to your coach, kind of understanding where to signpost them to. And if it comes to mental health, being like, knowing kind of where to signpost to, or doing the research with them. Like, it is kind of a give and take. Like, it's a services relationship, but it's also a relationship, and in an industry such as the one we're in, you have to have that element of like human care. So yeah, I'm sorry, I always go on such a tangent.
No, that's good. It's good. I think a lot of it, as with everything, right, has to do with education of the athlete, because at the end of the day, we're all providing services.
Yeah.
This is capitalism. We're these are our jobs. We're trying to make money, and we're providing services that we believe in. To in return for financial support from these athletes. And I think athletes need to be aware of the fact that it is a multifaceted process, and one professional isn't gonna, probably won't get you all the way to the end goal where you want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of coaches think, well, look, that's what the athletes want, so this is what I have to do. I have to be the psychologist, I have to be the physiotherapist, I have to be the powerlifting coach, whereas that's not true. And the only way to stop that from being the case is if we just stop. If we all just stop, you know,
Stop.
I call it like race to the bottom. It's like a race to the bottom attitude. You know, if one coach says, "Hey, I can do all of these things and I can do it for cheaper than you," you know,
Yeah.
what about the next guy? You know, what's he gonna do? He's gonna be, I can do all of these things plus one and cheaper than that guy. You know, that's not the approach we should be taking here. You know,
Yeah.
and it can only kind of come from within. So that's something I think is really, really important.
As well as like if you look at like a professional football team, a professional American football team, like basketball, whatever, they don't have one professional. If you saw kind of the Lakers with just like one coach, you'd be like, where is everyone?
What's wrong?
You know, like, it'd be weird. And like, I don't think powerlifters should sell themselves short if they're serious about their sport. And you know, that's not at anyone. Like, you don't have to have every single one. But I'm saying, like, if you are at the top end and you want kind of that athlete experience and you want to push yourself, then you wouldn't see any other, you know, professional athletes at that top end kind of with one professional. But saying that, it like powerlifting is a super undervalued and like under sponsored, I can't think of the word, like underappreciated sport. And it's not, you know, like CrossFit blew up. I don't see why, you know, any reason powerlifting shouldn't or can't. But at the moment, it's just not seen in such a bright light as other sports. So unfortunately, like, top athletes aren't just, you know, recruited and given this opportunity. It is usually out of pocket. So there is that understanding of kind of the boundary and the line for them of what they want and need. So I guess that's why, you know, as, you know, coaches and physios and psychs, we also put out a lot of free content because we do want to help athletes. But, you know, capitalism as well.
There you go. I again, just like, I think if you're putting out content, like I said, education is important. Just, you know, like you said, it's fine to refer. It's fine to take, like, if I put up something from you, as long as I credit you and say, this is where I got this information, this is a trusted source, that's fine. And everyone can do that. It's fantastic. It's a way to network with other professionals, which is only a positive thing from a professional sense.
Yeah.
But as well, like, I suppose it is our jobs to educate the clientele, you know?
Yeah.
They're not going to just become educated out of nowhere. But I've heard certain athletes say crazy things, like say things like, you know, if my coach couldn't solve this injury in X amount of time, I'd be out the door. I'd be over to another coach. That's not how it works. You know, I'm a powerlifting coach. I'm not a physiotherapist. I know nothing about your injury. You know, I might know about some of the programming things behind it all, but I know nothing about your injury, and anything I say is totally uneducated. So I'm not the guy, you know, that load shouldn't be placed on my back. So for other coaches who might be listening, because I'm sure we'll put this on Instagram as well, refer. You know, don't be afraid to take that stand and just tell them this is not how this relationship is going to work.
I mean,
you know?
Saying that, I don't want kind of clients and athletes now to be like, if they get advice from their coach, to be like, no, I won't listen. Because absolutely, like, there is always going to be, you know, like a Venn diagram, like there's going to be crossovers.
Of course, yeah.
So, like, if your coach does kind of say, well, these exercises might be helpful, don't be like, well, you're not a physio. Like, don't get that kind of like,
Facts.
you know, that's that. But it's, you know, also knowing kind of the scope of that crossover.
Yeah. That was going to be something I was going to talk about next, actually. Like, there is inherently going to be, I think, as a coach, the reason coaches get all the flack is because there's so many elements to it, you know? Like, you're not a psychologist, but there are obviously psychological elements of competition are massive. Yeah. And there are going to be some parts of that you're involved in directly. You know, on game day, I'm handling my athletes, you know?
Yeah.
And so there is certain I do have to shoulder some of that load, you know, some of the responsibility of ensuring that my athlete is psychologically primed to compete, you know. So as you mentioned, that Venn diagram, there is going to be crossover, but it's about kind of about finding where the scope of that ends, you know, where
Yeah.
you do need to refer.
Recognizing your
Absolutely.
own limits as a coach, that you can deal with this little bit, but if it gets past that, you need to refer it out to a professional. The same with nutrition. So, you know, where most coaches would be personal trainers as well, and we have this small degree of nutritional information. We can kind of push somebody in the direction of maybe better habits or more ordered habits. But if it gets to a point, we have to say, here, look, this is out of our hands, and you need, not to say that you need professional help. That's quite a bold statement to say to someone.
Also be careful how you say it.
Oh, big time. But
you need
You're
help.
a mess.
you need help.
Yeah, I think as well as like there are so many weird crossovers like with nutrition, and it's kind of, well, if someone's got an eating disorder, then who does that fall upon? Is that a nutritionist? Is that a sports psych? Is that a psych? Is, you know, like it's some kind of, you know, crossover in discussion that people are super confused with. And if, you know, a nutritionist isn't specialized with EDs, then refer to a nutritionist that is, and then talk to them about, you know, whether they're getting some sort of professional help. Get help. But not like that.
It's funny, I literally just mentioned it, but my next talking point here is what advices would you have for coaches with regards to kind of cultivating that positive mental approach when it comes to competition? What could you tell them that would help them in like on competition day when they're handling, you know?
On competition day, I think it's understanding, first of all, understanding kind of like the actual science behind competition anxiety. It's like state anxiety, and I'm not saying kind of go away and do your research. It's just understanding that, you know, that different athletes and personalities are going to react differently to this, you know, flush of emotions and anxiety. There are going to be, you know, physical and psychosomatic responses that they're going to have, and I think first of all, preparation for a coach is super key. Like understanding that you might have someone who's normally super confident and loud, and, you know, that's gone super quiet, and kind of understanding the best approach for them. And you might have someone who's normally super quiet and reserved, who's acting out and kind of, you know, saying, I don't know, trash talk to a competitor. I don't know. But people react in a different way. And I think the best thing a coach can do is, which, you know, a good coach would anyway, is get to know their athletes, you know, personalities, them as individuals, and in a sense understand how and why they'll be reacting. So whether that's a conversation prior to, if they've got any experience, as in like the athletes have an experience of them going through something like that before, and can maybe say, oh, well, I know that I get really quiet and nervous and then I feel really sick, and just being prepared for what there might be and being prepared to support that. And I think that is a really good starting place for coaches in terms of comp day psych, not treating everyone kind of with a blanket approach and being like, you're all going to be fine, you know, like, because some people don't want that positivity. Some people just want to be left alone. Some people need the support. And I think kind of finding out who and what, I suppose, is a good way to start with that.
Knowing your athletes.
Absolutely.
As people. Nice.
It's like competition day in powerlifting. What you'll see at any competition is screaming and slapping in the background in people who are inexperienced in competition, but think that this is, both coach and athlete, who think that this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah. This is smelling salts, you know. You just get blasted. I've seen so many times people use smelling salts for the first time in competition, and clearly it didn't do a good, like it was not good for them whatsoever, but they came back and smelled them again and again. Well, you know,
that's like what I was talking about before when I was saying like people just kind of throw things on for the first time in comp because they're like, I see other people do it, or, you know, like, I'm going to save the ammonia for when I stand on the platform because then it's going to have the biggest effect. And you're like, yeah, it probably will give you the biggest boost, but not in a good way. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's it's not a good idea.
I mean, for some people, like, you know, if you're super experienced, and I don't mind everyone kind of, maybe you disagree with this, but I think, look, try it, see what you think, see how if it helps you, fantastic, go for it.
But don't try it on the day.
Yeah, maybe not on the day.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But yeah, some advice to kind of bridge the gap, I suppose, to coaches in my competition experience is just, especially, it can be quite difficult if you're working with different people at the same time, because you physically have to get, if you're working with someone who's a hype monster, you know, they want the salts and they want the slaps. Like, I'm a fairly quiet, reserved, gentle person, but when I'm coaching certain people, like, they want me to beat the shit out of them, you know. It can be difficult to come from that to working with someone who is super calm, reserved, like, I'm here, it's fun, I'm ready, you know, don't need any external hype whatsoever. They just need you to be the supportive presence that you should be, you know. So don't be afraid to just stop, take a breath, calm down, because you as a coach need to also bring it back down.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're filling a role. It's almost, you know, acting, like you're acting a character, like you're being the support role that they need, and that you're giving them the motivation that they need. And I'm actually reading, sounds really nerdy, I'm reading a super interesting paper at the moment, and it's about coaching Gen Z athletes, and it says how much more extrinsic motivation, so like external motivation, younger athletes who are born after born from 1997 and younger need than, you know, people that might be a bit older. So knowing kind of that about them and filling that role, like I had a leg session with a friend once, and I'd actually never trained with them before, but I knew that they trained super hard. He's a bodybuilder and not a powerlifter, so like it's a completely different mental approach to training, and I say mental in every sense of the word. And I'm not a big person. I'm about 55 kilos. I'm 5'3" maybe, and I'm just not large. And I was and I was going for a squat. I'm going for a squat PB because I kind of, the most I'd done at that time was like, I'm not a strong squatter, by the way, and the most I'd done at that time was like 100, and I was proud of that, and I was happy with that, and I was just going for a leg session, and he's like, chuck more of the bar, and I was like, okay, I'll chuck some, you know, 2.5s on each side. He's like, nah, 5 minimum in this gym, and I was like, oh my god, okay. So did 110, and, you know, it was like RP7, which was like the weirdest thing, and then he was like, okay, cool, let's go up. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if I can, you know. I was like, okay, 115, and he's like, I told you, no 2.5 plates, we're going up to 120. And I was like I was getting in my own state, and like you said, Adam, I'm inherently not a loud kind of hypey kind of person, and so I was just kind of like doing my own techniques, probably practicing some, I don't know, I can't remember, and I was just kind of getting to my space. I had my music in, and this guy, he was like 5'10" or something, but he's like huge, and he was like, let's go, and he's super hypey, and he's still like, he's kind of that person like slaps himself in the face loads, and he's like, let's go, and like slaps me on the back just as I'm about to do it. I'm like super in my zone, so like I'm gonna go anyway, and I'm like pushed into the bar forwards, and like I'm like there's been an earthquake in my world. Like I said, I'm not big, and I was like, oh my god, and I was just like, right, I've got to stay in the moment here. I was like, I can't, you know. So I did it, and like I squatted, not to very good depth, but you know, that's another story. But I was just like so taken aback and like thrown out of my own momentum because, you know, he's such a hype person, and I was like, I was so kind of like intrinsically motivated and like, right, I need to do this, I need to bring my focus in, bring like the control and confidence in. And like as I was doing that, he was like, right, slap with both hands, and I was just like, and like completely taken out of my focus. And like I suppose that's a good example of like, know, you know, your athlete or who you're training with, and know what they need before they do a lift, especially if it's 20 kilos above their, you know, current max. Like, don't do that.
I think if you've ever felt the difference between a good lift out and a bad lift out on the bench press, that is what we're talking about here. You know, it's very similar. Even the process of it is quite similar. When you're given a good lift out on the bench press, you're kind of almost matching their pressure. You know, you're not pulling it and imparting your will on the person. You're just matching what they want. It's the exact same, actually. Mite coaching. You know, you're just trying to become the person that they are in some sense. You know,
yeah.
And if they communicate something else, if they, like, I've had that happen too, where I expected someone to be real calm and happy and quiet, but they felt like they needed something else, then great.
Slap me in the face. No.
It's happened.
That's you, actually, Adam. That's a good example. Adam always maintained that he was super calm, super quiet, and at his last meet, he was just like, let's go nuts. Let's just go crazy.
Experimenting.
You got to do it.
There you go. No sleep the night before. I needed something. Something.
Nightmare.
Awesome. Okay, we'll change course a little bit. How do you feel about people using kind of sports, or most commonly the gym or powerlifting, as a form of therapy, as kind of a self-driven form of therapy? Because obviously this has been a big topic of conversation surrounding gyms, at least in Ireland, and I'm sure over in the UK, being closed for the majority of the last 12 months. What do you make of that?
I think, you know, everybody has their catharsis when it comes to, you know, either mental health, stress, and for so many people that is the gym. And I don't think that's unhealthy. I think if anything, it's super healthy, unless it's, you know, it's always a spectrum, unless it's taken you know, past a certain point. But I think it absolutely is for those people who do use it as a self-care, a coping mechanism, something to help them. And this is talking outside of athletes as well. This is, you know, people that actually go to the gym for the enjoyment and for the mental health purposes and benefits. And to have that taken away from them is, you know, almost an equivalent for some people of just who go to therapy being like, well, you're not allowed to go to therapy anymore. Or being like, if someone on meds and being like, obviously it's not the same because of, you know, biological reactions, but for, you know, example's sake, being like, well, I'm taking your meds away. And it's kind of, first of all, it's a shock to the system, because the routine, especially for someone who's going for their mental health, is going to be so imperative and helpful for them. But that to be taken away, that in itself is going to, you know, throw their world. And it is hard because it's something that they've built up over such a long period of time to help them. And they've done it in such a positive way. For it to be taken away, like I said, it's not just a shock to the system, it's kind of a huge change to their life, and it's taking away something that ultimately is, you know, medicinal to them. And that in itself can be super harmful. Just like I said, if you're in a routine of going to therapy or in a routine of anything, just like I would say work, but for some people that's not so therapeutic. And that being taken away, just the sense of, first of all, the routine being taken away is super hard, but then taking away something that is a coping mechanism for stress and mental health and the other, you know, variables of life is super difficult. First of all, because like I said earlier in the podcast, you know, as humans, we hate change, but what we hate more is unexpected change and unwanted change. And just to be like, yoink, that's not yours anymore, something that you love and, you know, in a sense need, it's going to be harmful. So in the sense of, what do I think of people using the gym for therapeutic, you know, uses? if they're doing it in a healthy way that's not harmful to themselves. So like people who are like, oh, I'm training 5 hours a day 7 days a week, that's, you know, that's a form of self-harm. Like you're not letting yourself rest. But then if they're doing it in a healthy way and it's helping them cope and it's, you know, helping them live in a way that's healthier mentally and physically, absolutely, it's amazing. But taking it away, I think, would have shaken so many people.
Definitely. Do you think like with those, obviously like we kind of have already answered this question, but like if someone has some form of I suppose mental health issue that they rely on the gym to for lack of a better term keep under control, or deal with, do you think that maybe it would be wiser for them to, as we spoke about, outsource that issue rather than rely on this thing that, as we've seen in the last 12 months, can be, you know, taken away?
I mean, I definitely think that it's important to have fallbacks. Like with anything though, kind of, if you're going to therapy, and I'm not a mental health specialist, I'm not a psychotherapist, but if you're going to therapy, like I would suggest, you know, having something else that is cathartic to you, whether that's a hobby, or whether it is throwing yourself into your work. I don't think that, you know, relying on one thing ever is going to be, you know, the way forward, because, you know, like I said, the nature of how the world changes, and like you just perfectly said, how it just suddenly got plucked away. So I think things like the gym, you know, therapy, and things that are used as catharsis are, you know, are really, really positive. But I wouldn't suggest relying on one sole kind of one. So whether it's kind of picking up a hobby or enjoying the smaller things, I don't know, like I say this to my clients all the time, I end up giving way too many examples, so I'm going to try and not do that. But I think it's way too simplistic to kind of say this is my fix. Taking a holistic view on things, so kind of taking other things under your wing that you can control, whether, you know, gardening, or I'm doing more examples, but, you know, like other
Been there.
things,
To
like,
have multiple
you know,
avenues of stress relief, let's say, for want of a better term, especially now, I suppose,
yeah,
because we can't do a whole lot in lockdown. We have very few options, so it
yeah,
definitely seems like we need to be a little bit more creative in not relying on
yeah,
this one thing, regardless if it's like, for people who are powerlifters especially, seem to be really, really bought into this very niche amateur sport, even compared to other sports, especially people who are coaches, where it's your work, it's your hobby, it's your social life. For that to go, Adam and I have discussed this, it's pretty jarring and it's pretty mental. So to have these other avenues is pretty
yeah.
important. And to
And like, sorry,
just I was just going to find more and kind of be curious and try and sample different things, because you don't know when the next one's gonna go.
I mean, maybe think of it in a slightly more positive way, but yeah, absolutely. I think as well, what I was going to add is also try as much as you can to kind of make sure that these different avenues are in different environments, so like an outside one, an inside one. So like if you're like, gardening's my thing and like that's the only thing that I like, I don't know why I don't garden myself, but like, you know, gardening's my thing, and it's not, and then it starts, you know, hailing outside, and you're like sat outside in the hail, like this is the only way I can be happy. Like, have something you can do inside, outside, like anywhere, like knitting. I don't know why I'm saying such old people, you know, hobbies, or, and that's not to offend anyone who likes knitting or gardening either, but it's just, you know, make sure you have different locations and different types, because like the importance as well of getting outside is and I know like every health professional ever says that, but it is. And my friend who I was on my master's with actually did her master's dissertation on kind of like the help of kind of being in green spaces has on focus, mindfulness, concentration, and it's crazy. So making sure one of them's outside, I think's also super important. Not just like, I'm a streamer now, I'm just going to video game my life
That
away.
was the example I was thinking the entire time. I like video games a lot, but like, especially I'm lucky enough to have a different space where I, play video games, or I'm on my computer, or I'm in my office. I have a different space where I sleep, and but if you're someone whose like entire life is in one room, your hobbies, where you sleep, where you eat, that, it becomes even more important that you get out of that room. Get out of that space, right? Would I be right in saying that?
Absolutely. And the thing is, with a lot of people have kind of like their TV in their room, their desk in their room, and not only does that kind of give you a bit of cabin fever when you're going to be like, I'm stuck in this box, like it's going to have negative effects on your sleep, because then your brain will start associating this room with work and gaming, and then like with work you'll be like, well, this room's for sleeping and gaming, and so I can't focus. So it's really, really important when you can to separate the room you eat in, the room you work in, the room you play in. Like it's when you can, that is a super good thing to do. Super good.
I think that's, people have struggled
super
with
good.
that with
Super
training at
good.
home. That the space that was for relaxing and sleeping or eating or whatever suddenly becomes this space where you need to, especially in the case of powerlifting, you need to get focused, you need to get hyped up and exert yourself pretty heavily. I think that's a big reason why a lot of people just haven't taken to home training at all. That this space that was for rest and relaxation is now their place to do hard work. It just doesn't gel well at all.
Especially, as Amelia just mentioned, if you're working from home as well.
Yeah.
Work from home, live, rest, eat, sleep at home, and also train from home. Like, something's going to give, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are, like, a little tip, if you are working from home or you are trying to train from home and you're struggling, just create a sort of ritual routine beforehand. And whether that's going on, like making yourself go on a 20-minute walk, like you're walking to the gym, or kind of watching a motivational video in a different room, or literally using the doorway of your training room, wherever you're training, as kind of the balloon archway, or the walkway to the platform. Like, just separate it as much as you can from the task you were just doing or the day you had, whether it's kind of like having a meal, getting changed, doing that 5, 10, 15-minute walk. Like, walk as long as you want, I'm not going to stop you.
8 hours.
Walk the entire day. Maybe not that, be a bit fatigued, but yeah, absolutely. Like, create that routine, that ritual, whatever you want to make it. Separate it as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. Connor, is there anything else you wanted to ask? Any burning questions?
I don't think so. I think we were actually really good. We actually covered all of our talking points for the first time.
Very, very smoothly as well. We transitioned it nicely. I'm very pleased with that.
That's me going off on a tangent. That's why. It's actually really funny because I don't often get called Amelia. It's actually weird to say it, and to hear it in your guys' lovely accent is super refreshing.
Great. Why don't you often get called Amelia?
I mean, I don't know. To my mum's disdain, kind of growing up playing sport, I got called Potter a lot, or Potts. Like, my partner calls me Potts, not Amelia. I don't know. Like, I can't name any friends, I don't think, that called me Amelia. But it's nice to hear. Like, I like my name. I just never hear it.
Fair enough.
So thanks.
You're welcome. Amazing. Well, Potts, we really appreciate you. I'm delighted we got to chat to you, to sit down and talk, because hearing, kind of like we had Katrina Connolly, who you're friends with, right?
Oh yes, I know.
but we had her on, and hearing her process was super inspiring because it kind of mirrored our process and the very empathy focused or empathy driven
Yeah.
approach that we take to powerlifting. It's so refreshing as well. Obviously, it's to hear it from you. Obviously, it's far more important in your line of work. But yeah, we really appreciate what you're doing. We really appreciate the free content that you're putting out, and we're delighted we got to chat to you. So why don't you plug yourself? Where can people find you, and how do your services work? And if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Well, okay, don't mind if I do. So you can find me on Instagram at Pottsthinks. It looks like Pottsthinks, but it's not. And there's a Linktree link in my bio. If you want to write an application form or book in a call, or if you just want to drop me a message and kind of inquire about services and the process, or have any questions, then feel free to drop me a message.
Lovely.
Amazing. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, everyone. That was episode 7. Episode number 7. You'd swear we had like 100 episodes. I'm forgetting already. Episode number 7. Hope you enjoyed. If there's anything you would like us to discuss in the next one, or if there's anyone you would like us to talk to, please let us know. We will see you again in the next 7 days. Thanks for watching/listening. See you later.
All the best.